Hey guys, what's up? So, just chilling here in my car, actually just sitting, waiting for my sister to get done with practice. So, I decided to film this, and like I said, I'm sitting in my car. I don't have my mic with me, I just got my phone, so the audio is going to be really shit. Some of you going to notice that I'm showing off some of my face. Earlier today, I ended up doing a Twitch stream, and I didn't end up wearing my mask just because it's really hard to read chat. So, but I still like the aesthetic of the mask. The reason I was wearing them wasn't necessarily to hide what I looked like, and it was more so just kind of referential of, I don't know, I kind of always liked it when creators, when I was growing up, like, had, like, their avatar, or wore a mask, or something like that, just because, like, the focus was then less on the person and more so on whatever's being talked about. So I'm probably going to still keep up the mask stuff and using my avatar and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean occasionally you won't see my face. But yeah, I ended up checking out a show on Netflix that I wanted to talk to you guys about. And it's one that I had really heard about for a long time. And I think it's one that came out in 2011 or maybe a little before that and then went off the air in 2011. Sym-Bionic Titan, a show by our boy Gendy Tartanovsky, if you don't know the name, and I'm probably butchering the last name, but Gendy did Samurai Jack, as well as the Adult Swim show Primal. He is a fantastic director in terms of animation, and really any project that gets touched by him tends to get a lot of praise from content creators and people that talk about animation in particular. I mean, Samurai Jack came out end of the 90s, I want to say. I don't have any of my information on me, so it could be wrong, and it's still a show that gets talked about today, and it's one that ended up getting a 5th season 15 years after the show stopped airing. And that's crazy, and honestly, I'd love to see something like that for Sym-Bionic Titan, because it's a show that a lot of creators that do talk about it mention it as a forgotten gem or a missed opportunity for Cartoon Network. And it really is, because the show was taken off the air not because, at least from what I found, and I could totally be wrong, maybe nobody was really watching it, but it wasn't necessarily because of bad ratings or the show not performing well. It was because they couldn't get the toy rights for the show, so it was pulled from the air. Now, I kind of get that in the sense that Sym-Bionic Titan was probably a show that they definitely wanted to make toys for. I mean, the literal concept involves 3 robots that turn into 1 robot. It's got toy line written all over it. Just look at Transformers. Kids like robot toys. So, I get it, but like, it was a really good show in its own right. I definitely think the show should have been given a chance to continue going, and, you know, maybe they could have done toy stuff in the future, but I think the show, I honestly do really feel like it was a missed opportunity. But I could also understand how not everyone was super hype about it in the same way that they were for Samurai Jack. Because when I first started watching Sym-Bionic Titan, I didn't get into it. I kept watching it because I was trying to figure out what I was missing, why all these other people felt like the show deserved so much better. And honestly, for the first, probably a little less than half of the show, it did feel like it felt like it wasn't living up to the potential that a lot of people had kind of made me feel like the show was going to get. And it took me a little while and some reflection, but I feel like somewhere around episode 9 or something, 8 or 9, I ended up having an epiphany about the show, and that was the sound design was really off in comparison to the other work from Gendy that I'm very familiar with, which is Samurai Jack, a show that has fantastic sound design, and that's both in terms of the soundtrack, in terms of like the sound effects, but also in terms of when they choose to use dialogue, because Jack isn't a character that necessarily talks as much as the main characters of a lot of other shows. In fact, some of the episodes I remember most fondly from my walkthrough of Samurai Jack were ones in which Jack spoke little to not at all. One in particular where villains meet to try to plot the capture or destruction of Jack, and he as a character gets very little screen time in that episode, and when he does, he really doesn't speak at all. Or the episode between Jack and the ninja, which is one that is also beautifully animated and does a lot of fun things with light and shadow. highly recommend just checking out those 2 episodes. I wish I had the names for you. Maybe I'll put them on screen while I'm editing this, or maybe I'll just upload it and wish you the best of luck with the Google machine. Who knows? But I felt like Sym-Bionic Titan was really missing this. A lot of the songs I felt were very poppy, very plain, very, you know, it didn't really do anything for me. And sometimes it even, like, and that's fine. Sometimes it just took me out of enjoying the show. I felt like something didn't fit right, whether it was the sound of a slash or the music that was playing in the background. But somewhere along halfway through the show, I felt like this remedied itself. And I also felt like the animation really became more fluid. A lot of the, I mean, this is a show that has amazing fight scenes in the same way that Samurai Jack does. And it's really awesome to see, but maybe it was just because I was getting to like the show more, but I personally felt upon my first watch of this, and I do eventually, after taking some time away from it, would love to go back to the show. Maybe I'll show it to some of my friends or something like that. But it was really nice. Like, I felt like the show really hit its stride in the second half. I felt like once they had established the general concepts and really set a lot of, like, elements about the show into play so that when a character acted in a certain way, we weren't questioning it. It felt very in character. Once all of that was really established, I think the show, again, really hit its stride. I thought it was a clever show. It had some really great scenes that were referential to other forms of media, other tropes, but it also did its own thing, and it made you feel bad about these characters. It built an interesting world that had, you know, very diverse characters, and there were entire episodes, again towards that latter half, where I really didn't think this is something that would have aired on mainstream Cartoon Network. It felt more like an Adult Swim show. And that's not to say it was particularly vulgar, but some of the fight scenes, some of the concepts, some of the dialogue, the way the characters interacted and talked with each other, I definitely can understand why the final season of Samurai Jack, as well as Primal, are shows that aired on Adult Swim. And if via Netflix, Gendy was able to get another season for Sym-Bionic Titan, I would absolutely love to see it kind of not as held back by, you know, TV rules of what is fair for children to see. You know, if it's on Netflix, they don't really have to worry about, you know, following along with those standards, and the show, I think, could flourish even more than that. Some recent interviews have revealed that there is some, you know, thoughts from Gendy about the possibility of future things they could do with the show. And some of the articles I was looking at said that when the show was airing, he really didn't have a strong direction for the show at the time, and he felt like the show really never found its identity. And I could definitely feel like that, and I think that's why there really that big split for me in how the show felt. I felt as though the show was almost combating itself, and it was doing itself a disservice by trying to appeal to both these audiences, because a show can be made for both children and adults to enjoy. Movies can be made for both children and adults to enjoy, and I think animation is something that really could appeal to this, even though a lot of people tend to look at it as something that's just for children. Animation is a medium, not a genre, that's just for kids. It's a medium, it's a way to produce and create beautiful works of art that can tell compelling stories, that can tell dark stories, that can be made to entertain children, but it can also be used to tell adult stories. And I'm not saying that Sym-Bionic Titan needs to come back and be an adult show. If it was made with the exact same limitations on, like, what it could show that were in the first season of the show, I would 100% still watch it, because I enjoyed the first season of the show. You have 3 characters as your main characters, and this cast does grow a little bit, but the show is mainly focused on Alana, Lance, and Octus. Alana being the princess of this alien planet, Lance being one of the Imperial guards from said planet, and Octus being an experimental robot. Now, it's very interesting, because these are the premises that are really set up in those beginning episodes, and these are the roles that they play. But something that I think really benefited the second half of the show is these characters tend to break from these molds. Ilana is no longer this princess who's living in the palace, and while she does see people living in hardships by being a princess, by having to go on diplomatic missions, she has to adapt to living in Earth culture and not being someone of status and not being someone who is treated in a certain way. And she takes to it in stride because she's really an optimist. You know, but it is interesting for her to hold grudges against characters and to become a little more cynical as the show goes on. Lance is another one who's very hardened and cold, and because of this, when they take their cover as normal high school students on Earth, he's seen as very cool because he's aloof and he's got dark hair and he's very fit. It is very interesting because as the show goes on, we get some episodes that dive into the past, what happened to him, why he is as good as he is at fighting, why he's a part of this, and what his life was like before he was just a guard. And it's really interesting because, you know, there are definitely some things about his father, who's introduced in a flashback, that I have some theories on. I feel like it's pretty obvious, but I'm not gonna spoil anything for anyone who does want to go into this because I really didn't know a lot going into it myself. I just knew there were 3 robots turned into 1 robot, and they fought a monster of the week. And as the show goes on, it did something that I think is a sign of a good show, in which it starts the audience off very much with that formulaic monster of the week. The focus of each episode really was the monster. And that's not to say towards the end of the show there aren't any episodes that focus on monsters. But number one, I think those monsters become more creative, and they're not always ones that Titan can just solve by beating them up. Of course, that's usually the solution, but it's usually they have to be more clever about it towards the end of the show, and the real conflict comes from the human issues and the characters, and less so always the big monster. Octus is a very interesting character because he is a robot, and you have a lot of shows that have, you know... My mind immediately goes to beating up big monsters in a big robot Power Rangers. Heaven forbid. I was born in the late 90s and I grew up in the early 2000s. I watched a good bit of Power Rangers as a kid. Not enough so that I can recite any of it from memory, but enough so that I have a pretty good feel for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, at least. And it was very interesting because they very much could have just gone with a very standard robot. Oh, robot don't feel emotions. Robot is goofy and weird and not being able to interact. But they made him very human because in the story, Octus isn't just a robot. Octus isn't human either, but they have a whole episode that really focuses on his identity, what he is, how he views himself. And that's a lot for a kid's show. It's really interesting to see what they do with the character, and I think of the main group, Octus might be my favorite, which is something that I really didn't think going on. I tend to like the edgy characters. I tend to like the characters that are the strong, silent type and want to just kick ass. But Octus is this weird, square man when he is human, or square boy, and he ends up, you know, involved with, and I guess this is going to be he ends up in a humanish relationship with someone, and it's very strange because he doesn't choose a form that's conventionally attractive, but the personality behind Octus is a good person, and he has flaws, and he gets things wrong sometimes. He isn't this perfect machine, and I just love his interactions with the main character and how much he is revealed to mean to them. You know, it is touched on that they're like, oh, you're a robot, you don't get it, but like that's something that they do address because he is more than a robot. He's, as far as we know in what we have in the show, he's the only thing like him. But he basically is like an artificial intelligence to the point where we would actually want to get an artificial intelligence. That's to say he's close to human intellect, and he can't always get things that aren't 100% rational. He has, sometimes when they bring out a focus of something that is more abstract, doesn't necessarily work with him, and of course he's better with the math and the sciences, but that's just how he's wired. But there are people that are like that. There are people that are great with words, and then there are people that are great with numbers. There are people who are great with both. There are people that can only express themselves artistically. There are people who can hardly express themselves at all, and there are people that can fill the gambit with the things they can do. There's so much variety, so despite him not being human or of the same alien species that Lance and Alana are, he still very much feels just as much like a character that has his own problems and feelings and thoughts, and is just as much of a part of what makes Titan work. And it's a pretty typical premise in the fact that according to their culture, when the body, the heart, and the mind all work together is when you are, at your strongest, and, each character is symbolic of that. Ilana is this princess who, despite her status, would always try to do the best for her people and the people around her. She's the heart. Lance is this hardened, military-trained royal guard. He's the body, and Octus is, of course, the mind. And they all have a fun chemistry. They all really work well together, and I think the show does a very good job of making you interested in not just them, but the other characters, the popular kids at the school, like Kimmy the cheerleader, or the weird neighbor lady who has a thing for Octus when he's pretending to be their dad, or the two military. Well, you have like the military, which is like Steel. He's like this, the U.S. Army is the best army in the world. These robot scum need to get off our planet. And then you have this gentleman whose name's Solomon, who wears like a cloak and a hat and has, you know, Helsing vibes, and is just sitting there like, oh yeah, we've gathered all this alien technology, we have a flying base. And these guys just like don't like each other. And Solomon has like some greater connection. There's something with his organization, which is called G3, which leads you to believe that they've had a lot of interactions with things outside of Earth before. It really is a show that, like, I started out, and for half of it, I was like, people are overhyping this. People are allowing the nostalgia to get the best of them. Definitely not worth, you know, all the hype I've heard. It's not this really hidden gem. It's an okay show. And then finishing the show and looking back on all of it, I realized that, like, every step they had to make in the beginning was the show finding its identity, number one, but also ways they had to establish the characters, the world, and how things worked. And that's the kind of struggle that you get with every show. Every show has to set up the characters. Every good show has to set up the characters. And this isn't like a Netflix series where a lot of people today are so used to having shows, especially live action shows, less so with animation, that are, you know, 45 minutes, an hour long for an episode. You can set up a lot in the first episode of the show that's worth, you know, 2 to 4 episodes of an animated series. And there you go. Now you can kind of take off and do more things from the second episode onwards once you've really gotten that concept established. And I felt like I harshly judged Titan. It is a show that, like, I saw commercials for growing up, and I never really checked it out. I don't know, it didn't grab me at first. I don't know what it was. I don't know why I didn't check it out as a kid, because, like, I feel like, you know, knowing the shows I watched, I would have wanted to check it out when it was airing, but there was a period in time in which I was even affected by the mentality. My parents kind of enforced it on me. It was like, oh, you're getting older, you know, you shouldn't watch as many cartoons or kids at school. And I see that with my younger sister, in which, for a period of time, and she still likes live action shows, and so do I. But it's something that I've seen in her friends, with even this spike in Avatar The Last Airbender content that was going on over the last few months, in which she had a friend where she was like, oh, you should check out this show, it's really good. And she's like, oh, I don't watch cartoons, those are for little kids. And, like, I get that, you know, like, I get why people have that mentality, but I don't agree with it, and I think it's so wrong. I hate that implication with, like, animation, because I feel like it really takes a lot away from animation. I mean, anyone who watches anime, and, you know, again, there's a whole trope around, like, oh, people who watch anime, but, like, a lot of people watch anime now. It's been so, like, pulled away from that I definitely think that it's, you know, something that can handle more mature themes. And a lot of animation over the last 10 years has really found its stride and includes more mature themes. And that's not just sex jokes and adult jokes, in which they actually put lessons and concepts, and they make things that aren't easy. It's not just lessons that, like, sharing is important and be nice to other people because you would want them to be nice to you. Shows are handling concepts like, what's it like to feel like an outsider? What's it like to not have your feelings met from someone you like? What's it like to deal with a relationship built on lies or toxicity? What's it like to deal with the loss of loved ones? This is stuff that's important. This is stuff that happens, and I think I'm just going on a bit of a rant here, so I think I'll call this video right now, but I highly recommend any of you guys who are just looking for a 20-episode show to put some time into and binge. I could not recommend Sym-Bionic Titan more. I missed it the first time around, but I'm so thankful I went back and checked it out. Alright, so you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Stick around, I am still making that video on the Sandman series, but that one I definitely want to be scripted because I have some points I'd like to make both about the characters, the story, and definitely the author Neil Gaiman. So thank you guys for being so patient with me. Check out my Twitch. I started ranking all of the Pokemon with my friend earlier today, so hopefully we can get back to that. And I also recently started playing Persona 4 because I had another friend show up who's been begging me to play that game. So hopefully you guys enjoy the content I'm putting out. Check out my stickers I made, or at least go check out my Instagram and the fun designs I have on there. I hope nobody thinks I'm just trying to sell merch for like the sake of it. I'm making fun little drawings that I really enjoy actually making, and if somebody buys it, that's awesome. But like, you guys never have to feel pressured. I don't want anybody who doesn't have the financial, I don't want anybody who doesn't have disposable income to be wasting money on my merch. It's just something I really do enjoy making. I'm doing it for me, and if nobody buys it, I'm still happy with a lot of these designs at the end of the day. I love my stickers. I love my sweatshirts. So, thank you guys again so much for watching. Give this video a big old like. Subscribe if you haven't. Comment. Ask me to talk about a show you want. I have a long list of things that people have brought up to me and things I've wanted to check out in my own right that I definitely still need to get to. So, again, thank you guys so much for watching, and you guys have a fantastic day.